You trade 8 hours of your irreplaceable life for a number that appears in a computer somewhere, and then you trade that number for things you don't need to impress people you don't like. The whole arrangement sounds insane when you say it out loud. But here's the twist that'll keep you up tonight. This wasn't always the deal. For most of human history, people traded their time for something real, something you could hold, something that couldn't vanish when a bank decided to close its doors. Somewhere between your grandfather's world and yours, the entire agreement got rewritten, and nobody asked your permission. This is the story of how they convinced you to work for vapor. Let's start with what's sitting in your pocket right now. That leather wallet, that digital app, those little rectangles of plastic. Open it up. Look at what's inside. You're staring at paper. Or worse, you're staring at pixels on a screen. Numbers that represent other numbers that represent promises made by people you'll never meet. You can't eat it. You can't burn it for warmth. You can't build a house with it. And yet, you'll spend the majority of your waking life chasing more of it. Your parents did the same. Your children probably will too. 3 generations deep into a system that would sound like black magic to someone from 1870. But here's what they don't teach you in school. What they can't teach you, because the whole house of cards depends on you not asking the question, what happened to the real thing? Go back to January of 1933. Picture a small town in Oklahoma. Dust rolling through the streets, families packing their lives into trucks. The Great Depression isn't just a chapter in a textbook. It's your neighbor hanging himself in his barn because the bank took his farm. It's your sister's kids with swollen bellies because there's no food. It's watching your father, a man who worked every day of his life, reduced to standing in a bread line with his hat in his hands. And here's the part that drives the knife deeper. The food exists. The warehouses are full. The farms are producing, but the money disappeared. Some number in some ledger somewhere went to zero, and suddenly people are starving in the richest country on earth. That's when Franklin Delano Roosevelt stands up in front of the microphones and says 6 words that should have made everyone suspicious. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Beautiful rhetoric. Poetic. Completely wrong. What people should have feared was exactly what was happening. The money wasn't real, and when everyone realized it at the same time, the illusion shattered like glass. But Roosevelt had a problem. You can't feed people with speeches. You can't rebuild an economy with hope. So, on April 5th, 1933, he signs Executive Order 6102. Read that order carefully, if you can still find the original text. The President of the United States makes it illegal for American citizens to own gold. Not illegal to own a lot of gold. Illegal to own any gold. They gave you until May 1st to turn it in. Bring your gold coins, your gold bars, your grandmother's gold jewelry to the bank. They'd give you $20.67 for every ounce. Paper dollars. Promises. And if you didn't comply, you'd face 10 years in prison and a $250,000 fine, which in modern money would be roughly $5 million. Think about what that means. The government wasn't asking. They were confiscating the only form of money that had held value for 5,000 years. Gold didn't crash in the Depression. The paper notes that promised to be redeemable for gold crashed. So instead of admitting the paper was worthless, they made the gold illegal. Now imagine you're a farmer in Kansas in 1933. You've been saving gold coins in a coffee can under your floorboards. Real money. Your grandfather gave them to you. They survived the last panic, the one in 1907. They survived the World War. They're your insurance policy against exactly this kind of disaster. And now a man on the radio is telling you that your insurance policy is a criminal offense. Turn it in, or go to prison. Most people complied. They had no choice. The ones who didn't became criminals for the act of saving real money. But here's the beautiful part. the magic trick that would make any con artist jealous. After the government collected everyone's gold, after they had it safely locked away in Fort Knox and the Federal Reserve vaults, they changed the price. In January of 1934, the Gold Reserve Act revalued gold from $20.67 per ounce to $35 per ounce overnight. With the stroke of a pen, the government just stole 40% of the value from everyone who turned in their gold. They forced you to sell low, then immediately raised the price. And this wasn't a bug in the system. This was the plan. Your grandfather got robbed in broad daylight, and they called it monetary policy. Fast forward to August 15th, 1971. Richard Nixon appears on national television on a Sunday night, interrupting Bonanza, the most popular show in America. People are annoyed. They want to watch cowboys, not listen to a president who's already neck-deep in scandals. Nixon announces that the United States will temporarily suspend the convertibility of the dollar into gold. He says, temporary. It's been 53 years. That suspension is still in effect. What Nixon actually did that night was sever the last thread connecting your money to anything real. Before that moment, foreign governments could technically exchange dollars for gold. After that moment, the dollar became backed by nothing except the promise that other people would accept it tomorrow. Money became belief. Currency became consensus. Your labor became faith in a system that prints more tickets to the show whenever it needs to cover its debts. Now let's talk about what this means for you, sitting here in 2025. Probably reading this on a device that costs 3 months of rent. You wake up at 6 in the morning, maybe earlier. You shower, you dress in clothes that signal compliance, and you commute to a building where someone who makes 10 times what you make will decide if you get to keep doing this next year. You sit under fluorescent lights that give you headaches. You attend meetings that could have been emails. You smile at people you'd never choose to spend time with. You eat lunch at your desk because taking a real break makes you look uncommitted. And at the end of this marathon, after you've given them the best hours of your day, the hours when your mind is sharpest and your body still has energy, they give you access to a number. Not money, access to money. Because it's not actually in your hand, it's in their computer. And the agreement is that you can use this number to claim goods and services from other people who also believe in the number. But the number itself is becoming less valuable every single day. They call it inflation, like it's weather, like it's a natural phenomenon you just have to accept. 2% annually, they say, as if that's reasonable. Let's do the math without using digits. Over 20 years, at 2% inflation per year, your money loses about 1/3 of its purchasing power. Over 40 years, it loses over half. You're running on a treadmill that's slowly speeding up, and they've convinced you the solution is to run faster. Here's what makes it sinister. Your labor doesn't inflate. You only get 24 hours in a day. You only get roughly 60 to 80 years of life, if you're lucky. Every hour you work is an hour you can never get back. It's gone, vanished, spent. And what did you get in return? A number that's worth less every time you check your bank account. They're stealing your time in slow motion, and they've structured the theft so perfectly that you think it's normal. The system has a name for you. They call you a consumer, not a citizen, not a human being. A consumer. Your job is to consume. Your purpose is to take that depreciating number they gave you and convert it back into goods and services as quickly as possible, which keeps the money moving, which keeps the game going. If you try to save it, inflation eats it. If you try to invest it, you're gambling in a casino where the house has cameras everywhere and changes the rules mid-game. The only winning move is to spend it, which keeps you dependent, which keeps you coming back to work on Monday morning. They've turned you into a hamster on a wheel, and the wheel is generating their profit. Now, let's talk about the late 1940s and 1950s. because this is when they weaponized your desires against you. The war is over. The soldiers are coming home. The factories that built tanks and bombers need something else to build, or they'll have to close. The economy is facing a critical question. What do we do with all this production capacity? The answer came from an army of men in suits with degrees in psychology. They'd been studying Freud, studying Pavlov, studying how to make people want things they didn't need. Edward Bernays, the nephew of Sigmund Freud, became the architect of modern consumer culture. He didn't sell products. He sold feelings. He sold identities. Before Bernays, you bought things because you needed them. After Bernays, you bought things because of who you wanted to become. He convinced women that smoking cigarettes was an act of liberation, a statement of independence. He called them torches of freedom and hired actresses to smoke in the New York Easter Parade. Sales exploded. He convinced Americans that they needed bacon for breakfast by getting doctors to endorse it. He turned consumption into patriotism, waste into virtue, debt into the American dream. The 1950s became a laboratory for engineering desire. Advertisers learned that if they showed you a happy family in a new car, you wouldn't buy the car. You'd buy the promise of happiness. If they showed you a successful man in a tailored suit, you wouldn't buy the suit. You'd buy the promise of success. They were selling futures, selling identities, selling a version of yourself that you could become if only you purchased the right combination of products. And it worked. It worked so well that we're still living inside the experiment. Your grandfather worked to survive. You work to become. Here's the mechanism of the trap, the gears of the machine. They pay you just enough to keep you showing up, but not enough to escape. The salary is calibrated perfectly. It covers your rent, your car payment, your groceries, your phone bill, your streaming subscriptions, your weekend entertainment. Maybe there's a little left over that you manage to save. But then your car breaks down, your tooth cracks, your landlord raises the rent. That little bit of savings evaporates, and you're back to zero. The system maintains you in perpetual precarity, always one emergency away from disaster, which means you can never afford to take risks, to quit the job you hate, to start the business you dream about, to move to the place where you actually want to live. They've got you right where they want you. Too comfortable to revolt, too precarious to relax. And the cruelest part is that the work itself has become untethered from meaning. Your great-grandfather could see the result of his labor. He built a barn, and the barn stood there. He planted crops, and the crops grew. He fixed a wagon, and the wagon rolled. There was a direct connection between his effort and the outcome. But what do you make? You send emails. You attend meetings. You update spreadsheets. You manage projects. You coordinate with stakeholders. At the end of the day, at the end of the year, at the end of your career, what do you have to show for it? More numbers in the computer, maybe a title change, maybe a plaque on the wall, nothing you can touch, nothing that proves you were here. The existential weight of that emptiness is crushing people, but we've medicalized it. We call it anxiety. We call it depression. We prescribe pills to treat the symptoms while ignoring the disease. The disease is that you're spending your one irreplaceable life doing things you don't care about, for people you don't respect, in exchange for tokens that lose value while you sleep. Let's go deeper into the deception, because the money isn't even the final form of the con. The real product they're selling you is time displacement. They've convinced you that life happens later. Not now, later. First, you go to school, because you'll need the degree for later. Then, you get the entry-level job, because you'll need the experience for later. Then you work the 60-hour weeks, because you'll need the promotion for later. Then you save for retirement, because you'll finally live when you're 65. The whole structure is designed to keep you perpetually oriented toward a future that never actually arrives. And by the time you realize the game, by the time you wake up and understand that you've been trading your present for a future that keeps receding like a mirage, you're 67 years old with a bad back and kids you barely know. They didn't steal your money. They stole your life, and they paid you with money to distract you from the theft. But here's where it gets even darker, where the machine reveals its true sophistication. They've made it voluntary. Nobody's holding a gun to your head. Nobody's forcing you to take the job, sign the lease, buy the car. You choose it. Every morning you choose it. And that choice is what makes you complicit in your own exploitation. You can't revolt against the system you're volunteering to participate in. You can't blame them when you sign the contract. The trap is invisible because you walk into it with your eyes open, because they've structured the alternatives to be even worse. What's your option? Live on the street? Starve? Watch your children go without? The choice between exploitation and destitution isn't a choice at all. It's extortion dressed up as freedom. Now, let's talk about the escape, because there is one, but it requires you to do something that feels impossible. You have to stop wanting what they're selling. You have to decouple your sense of self from your purchasing power. You have to kill the version of yourself that believes happiness comes from accumulation. This isn't self-help advice. This isn't positive thinking. This is deprogramming. You've been conditioned since birth to believe that your worth is measured in dollars, that your success is visible in your possessions, that your life is a resume you're building for some cosmic job interview. All of it is a lie designed to keep you productive and obedient. The first step is recognizing that you don't need most of what you own. Look around your home right now. How much of it actually matters? How much of it could disappear tomorrow and your life would be fundamentally unchanged? The couch you're sitting on, the art on your walls, the clothes in your closet that you haven't worn in 2 years. You paid for all of it with hours of your life. You traded your time for things that are now gathering dust. That's not wealth. That's proof of robbery. The second step is harder. You have to become comfortable with being invisible. The entire consumer system depends on you caring what other people think. The car you drive, the neighborhood you live in, the brands you wear, they're all signals you're sending to strangers whose opinions don't actually matter. But you've been trained to believe they do matter, that social status is survival, that being judged poorly is a kind of death. It's not. You can drive a 15-year-old car. You can wear the same jacket for a decade. You can live in a small apartment in an unfashionable part of town. And the only thing that will happen is that shallow people will think less of you, which means you'll finally discover who your real friends are. The third step is the radical one. You have to reclaim your time, not by working less at the same job, which is impossible, but by restructuring your entire life around the question of what you actually need to survive versus what you've been convinced you need. Most people spend 30 to 40% of their income on housing. Why? Because they believe they need a certain amount of space, a certain kind of neighborhood, proximity to certain amenities. But that belief is costing you years of your life. If you cut your housing cost in half, you can cut your required income in half. If you cut your required income in half, you can work half as much. The math is simple. The execution is terrifying because it requires you to abandon the script. There are people living right now, today, who have figured this out. They're not famous. They're not on the cover of magazines. They're the ones who retired at 35, not because they got rich, but because they got free. They live in small houses. They drive old cars. They cook their own food. They wear clothes until they wear out. And they have something you don't. Time. Unstructured, unmonetized, glorious time to read, to think, to create, to explore, to sit by a river and watch the water move. They escape the machine not by winning within it, but by refusing to play. This is not a call to poverty. This is a call to clarity. Poverty is deprivation. What I'm describing is liberation through subtraction. The difference is intention. Poor people lack money and wish they had more. Free people have enough money and have stopped wishing for more. That psychological shift, that moment when you realize enough is enough, that's the escape hatch. But I need to be honest with you about what you're up against. The system will fight you, not with violence, with guilt. Your family will think you're crazy. Your friends will be uncomfortable around you because your choices are a mirror reflecting their own compromises. Your coworkers will judge you for leaving. Society will label you a dropout, a failure, someone who couldn't hack it. And part of you will believe them because you've internalized their values so deeply that your own liberation will feel like defeat. You'll have to sit with that discomfort. You'll have to get comfortable being misunderstood, because the alternative is spending the next 30 years commuting to a job you tolerate, managing a lifestyle you can't afford, chasing a retirement age that keeps getting pushed further away while your health deteriorates and your dreams die from neglect. The real question isn't whether you can escape. The real question is whether you're willing to pay the price of freedom, which ironically costs nothing in money and everything in courage. You'll have to disappoint people. You'll have to say no to invitations, opportunities, expectations. You'll have to watch your peers buy houses and take vacations and post pictures that make their lives look enviable while you're living in a studio apartment and riding a bicycle to save money. The optics are terrible. The reality is that you're stealing your life back from a system that was perfectly designed to consume it. Here's the final piece, the part they really don't want you to understand. Your labor is the most valuable commodity in the entire economic system. Not oil, not gold, not data. You, your time, your energy, your attention, everything, every single thing in this economy is built on the foundation of human labor. The buildings, the products, the services, the infrastructure, all of it comes from people trading their time for tokens. And you've been conditioned to believe that your time is worth whatever number they decide to pay you. Minimum wage, salary, hourly rate, as if your life can be accurately priced by someone who's never met you. But what if you decided your time is priceless? Not metaphorically, literally priceless. What if you decided that no amount of money is worth spending 8 hours a day doing something that makes you feel hollow? The entire system depends on you not making that calculation. It depends on you believing that survival requires surrender, that comfort requires compromise, that security requires selling the only non-renewable resource you have. They've built a civilization on the theft of your time, and they've convinced you to call it a career. So here we are, at the end of this investigation, and you're probably feeling something uncomfortable right now. Maybe anger, maybe despair, maybe a creeping sense that I'm right, but you're trapped anyway because what choice do you have? You've got bills, you've got responsibilities, you've got people depending on you. And that's exactly how they want you to feel. Aware enough to be anxious, but trapped enough to be compliant. But awareness is the first crack in the cage. You can't unsee what you've just seen. You can't unknow what you now know. The next time you're sitting in traffic on Monday morning, you'll feel it differently. The next time you're in a meeting that should have been an email, you'll recognize the theft in real time. The next time you check your bank account and feel that little spike of anxiety, you'll understand that the anxiety isn't personal failure. It's the system working exactly as designed. And maybe, just maybe, that awareness will metastasize into action. Maybe you'll start asking the dangerous questions. How much do I actually need? What am I actually working for? What would my life look like if I optimized for time instead of money? Those questions are viruses in the program. Once you start asking them, the whole illusion begins to glitch. The deal they offered you was simple. Trade your life for digits, and those digits will make you happy. But happiness never came. It couldn't come, because happiness isn't a product you can purchase. It's a state that emerges when your life aligns with your values, when your time is your own, when you're not perpetually exhausted and anxious and wondering if this is all there is. This is the worst deal you'll ever make, and you make it every day you clock in. The only question left is whether you're ready to renegotiate.